here's that story. Ed Linfante, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Glad to see such a big crowd here at this Chino event, because really there is a lot to talk about that hasn't been covered in the VLR war. Number one was the experience of who they selected to be pilots in the 506. The way Florida was situated, they had what they called RTU training bases. That's where new pilots come out of the wings and whatnot. Then they go to RTU, and the point is to be trained to be a fighter pilot. Well, when the 506 was being formed, the people in charge, they wanted what they considered the best cadre of fighter pilots to fly those missions. So we had all kinds of captains who had been RTU instructors be put into that 506. And then they also picked some lowly guys like me who had just finished RTU to also be in that outfit. Not whether I deserved it or not. And I recall that flying with these guys on some of the practice flights at Lakeland showed me how good they really were. You didn't want to tangle with them one-on-one unless you were super yourself, because you were going to come back with bullets in your rear end. And one of the things that hit me, I have a picture of my bunkmate. We lived in Paw Paper Barracks at Lakeland, and every two pilots had a 4x8 plywood panel to more or less wall up his section. Now I was there on Waldorf with a friend, John Sandy McMullen. He didn't seem like the kind of guy that would be a fighter pilot. He used to play the piano, and he'd go to the orchestra club, and he'd play Claire de Lune and stuff like that. He was kind of highbrow. He was supposedly engaged to the sister of Ruth Hussey, an actor in those days. I don't know how true that is. But anyway, poor Mac, on a practice flight where we were sent to escort B-17s out of MacDill Field at Tampa at high altitude, like 32,000 feet. We were up there and we were escorting them on a mock mission, and lo and behold, the element leader who Mac was flying wing on said he couldn't understand what Mac was trying to tell him over the radio. Now, he was told, well, stay with Mac, stay with Sandy, they called him more, and see what's wrong. Well, the other leader did go with Sandy, and he said all Sandy kept doing was muttering something that was unintelligent or made no sense. And the next thing he knew, he said he was in a spiral, a steep spiral, heading down to Earth. And his element leader tried staying with him and said eventually we hit 505 indicated, which is the peg on the P-51 in those days. Now it's about 440 in knots. And he said, I don't know what's wrong with him. He's not answering. Well, he plowed into Arcadia, Florida, which is where he won his wings in PT-17s, and he blew himself and that airplane up to smithereens. He and body parts were spread out 50 yards around that airplane. So I lost my roommate that day. And I remember at breakfast, I don't know if it was a bad omen or what, but after we ate, he didn't like his shiny wings. And he took out his cigarette lighter, and he started darkening it to make it mosaic or whatnot. I said, what are you doing that for, Sandy? I don't like it that shiny. Makes you look new. So anyway, that was his last day. Now, I had an empty bunk next to me, and all of a sudden, it gets filled by a captain who's returning from the ETO in the Mediterranean theater, a combat veteran with I don't know how many missions under his belt, but me being a brand new lowly second lieutenant, I looked up to him like God, and he'd tell me about his missions, and I'm thinking, wow, he survived this, he survived that, he dive bombed with A-36s, which was a dive bomber version of the 51. He did all kinds of things, and I listened in awe at his stories. I said, gee, so now I got another roommate, well, he's not really a roommate, a bunkmate. So as Bob Grant here just mentioned, on May 28th of 1945, he's on his first mission with us, and he gets shot down and killed. And I'm saying, geez, I had Sandy get killed with an accident, and now this guy I adored, he gets killed, so experience isn't really that much a factor. If they got your number, you're finished. And that's what happened to my first two contacts that I lived with. But then it got into my mind that this is really probably a pretty dangerous business. What did I get into? We used to fire out over the Gulf of Mexico aerial gunnery. And after aerial gunnery, there's always some guy that wants to horse it around. And one of them was a guy named, I think, Goodfellow, Flight Officer Goodfellow. So he flies down to the deck right over the water, and it was a still day like it is here. And so there was no ripples or anything that you could really judge your height over water. And they all say flying over water can be dangerous. You don't know how high you are. Well, unfortunately, he got way too low, and fortunately for his other element pilots, they stacked up. But he hit the water and buried his scoop in that water and went in and got killed. And that night, I went to the mess hall and sat down pretty close to our group leader, Brian Harper, and he was discussing the day's events and the fact that we had lost about 5 guys, Goodfellow, Matt, Sandy McMullen, and a guy named McGuire, and another guy named Newman, who actually flew his P-40 into an ocean after checking out at Craig Field in Selma, Alabama, and getting killed. And he said right away, he said, you know, I wish the hell you guys would quit horsing around. You do your aero gunning, come back, don't go trying to burgle or show off how good you are. He says, a deck pilot is no good to me or anybody else. And I'm going to tell you, he says, you're going to have plenty of chance to get killed overseas. So I said, what a sermon. Do I need it? Excuse me? Okay, now I want to get on to the June 1st mission. Now the June 1st mission, prior to the June 1st mission, the 15th and 21st fighter groups were making missions to Japan, and they had a couple of missions. They were partial aborts. All the airplanes did not abort, but about half of them did. The other half somehow flew left or right of the danger zone and got around those fronts and continued on to Japan and came back. And I thought that pretty strange. In my mind it said, you really could finish that mission if you had the balls, or if you knew what you were doing. So then the 1st of June mission comes along, and we're getting a briefing around 5 a.m. Some had a halfway decent night's sleep, some others didn't. In our memory, there were banzai attacks which sometime happened in the middle of the night, and if you heard your perimeter guards firing a machine gun at 3 o'clock in the morning after you slept about an hour and a half, you didn't know what was going on. Hey, another banzai attack coming or what, you know? And that was hard to get back to sleep when you had to get up 5 o'clock to the briefing. Well, at the briefing, the weatherman on that mission said we should not go. He says there's a big frontal zone of bad weather about halfway to Japan, and we would advise you don't attempt to fly through. Well, things changed that. First of all, we got another report from a weather ship that the heights were only up around 25,000 feet, and we could probably fly over it. And then the biggest problem was the flight leader for the entire mission was going to be one of our 506th squadron leaders named Harrison Shipman. He was the head of the 458 squadron. But in our planning group, we had a lot of gung-ho pilots. We had pilots who had flown in the Pacific battles, and they loved the action, and they wanted to be embroiled in the fight. They didn't want to be in operations planning the paperwork. So they more or less planned inexpertly, I will say right now. But the guy that decided to become head of the fleet, he bumped Harrison's ship and he said, I'm taking your place as flight leader of this mission. Well, he outliked him. He was lieutenant colonel, and Shipman was a major, so that was that. But he was a gung-ho guy. He didn't want to abort anything. And maybe he heard about the earlier flights from the other squadrons that managed to circumvent the storms and complete their mission. So the word abort was a no-no to him. So anyway, let me go a little deeper into the technical aspects of why we flew like we did. Now, the P-51, like most all you guys who are so studious of airplanes know, has a two-stage blower. That's the supercharger. Now you can set it for different altitudes as to when it kicks in for high blower. Well, when we were escorting B-29s, we would rendezvous over an island called Iwo Jima, which was like a pyramid about almost 3,000 feet high. And the B-29s would come in about 11,000 feet. So we'd fly about 11,000 feet with them and go on our way at 11,000 feet. And with the high blower setting, set to come on at 14,000, you were getting pretty close to the minimum fuel burn, which is actually what you're looking for on a VLR flight. So that seemed to make sense. The other thing was, they felt that we gave a big morale boost to the B-29s when we would be flying within 500,000 feet of their altitude, and they see 144 P-51s escorting them. So it was something for their morale. They had already been flying about 4 hours to get there where we were. And that was another reason. The technical aspect of getting minimum fuel flow close to where you switch to high blower, and also the fact that you were a big morale maker for the B-29s. But those things were really secondary, because we went out there on that mission, and I believe Bill Ebersole was on it too, And we flew right out to the front. And now if you fly to the front at 11,000 feet and you can't penetrate, what are you going to do now? Are you going to spiral climb up to 25,000 feet to go over it maybe? And it's going to waste a lot of fuel climbing up about 15,000 feet or so. Now you make up some of it on your descent. Once you get past it, you can cut back and dive down and join the bombers again. But that was a no-no. We really couldn't do that. We figured we wouldn't have the fuel to handle it. And you had to repeat the thing coming back, and you may not be able to do it. So those were kind of fallacies. When we got to that front on June 1st, our Colonel Scandrett, who was leading, he was a gung-ho man, I'm telling you, he talked to the Navigator B-29 command ship, and they asked, are you planning to continue on and do you want to abort? Well, he didn't like the word abort. I told you he wanted action. He says, no, we're going through. Well, I'll tell you, I think every flight leader must have got a lump in his throat when he heard that. We're going through. 144 airplanes are going to go in formation through a nasty weather. Are you kidding? But we had no choice. Our flight leaders were told, go on instruments, and the rest of you guys fly contact with your element leader or your flight leader, and they'll get this through. Well, no way did that work. No way did that work. As soon as we got into the front, guys were complaining about the bumpiness, the sleet, rain, radio static. Couldn't tell guys what they were all now concerned about mid-air crashes. They couldn't see one another anymore. What are you going to do with 144 airplanes in a mess like that? It's too late. Now you're stuck with it. Now here's what inadvertently saved my life, I think. My element leader was a Captain McClure, who was a West Point graduate. I never considered him to be a top-notch pilot, but he was a West Pointer, nevertheless. And when we got into the muck, I'm flying contact on him, I'm bouncing around a little bit with the roughness, and I could look at him, and I could see the flight leader right next to him, Colonel Scandrett of all people, the gung-ho guy leading. So McClure looks down in his cockpit or something, I don't know whether to check his tanks, his oxygen mask, or what, and as he did so, he slid a little bit to the left, and his prop cut off part of the tail of the lead plane, which disappeared in the gloom just like that, plus his wingman, Bob Graham, who didn't know what the hell was going on, and just was flying contact with him. So now McClure is all excited. I'm getting vibration, we're going to have to abort. I said, well, I'm going to abort with you. I can't see any other airplanes. I'm not going it alone. So he aborted, and we turned back to Iwo. And we got out of the rain and all that, and he said, do I have any damage? He said, I'm getting a lot of vibration. I said, well, your prop circle looks fat, like you might have a bent prop, and I'm not sure what I see in a fuselage, a loose piece of cowling, or what. Well, that wasn't loose. It turned out to be oil from the propeller, which are hydraulically actually a propeller pitch by fluid, by hydraulic fluid. So, but he was all excited now. He had a plane that was, you know, worrisome. When we get back to Iwo, in fact, we met a P-51 night fighter who was on combat air patrol during our absence, and he led us on into Iwo, and he calls the tower and he wants landing instructions. Well, he's still got these big 110-gallon wind tanks on with very little used fuel from them. Now, they could have told him to fly around and burn out the fuel to save the tanks and then come in and land if everything's okay. But he's got a lot of vibration and he's concerned. So he goes right in and lands, and he class 26 the airplane, and I'm sure some of you guys know that means he put that plane out of commission because they couldn't repair it after he buckled the wings, because he landed with the tanks with at least half their fuel in them. They told me, so I said, what do I do? He said, well, fly around until you burn all the fuel in your externals. We don't want to waste it. Then come in and land. Well, here's the other guys fighting all this bad weather, and I'm back at Iwo, buzzing Navy ships, having a ball. And I don't know what the hell is going on, but I know it can't be good. So I finally come in and land, and we go to the flight line, and I get debriefed, and I wait there, and then I see P-51s coming back, mixed squadrons. One guy would be flying with a guy from the 21st, and another guy would be flying with a guy from the 15th, or different squadrons. They joined up anybody they could see to get back, which made sense, of course. But by the end of the day, as you were told, 27 airplanes were missing, and actually 25 pilots. One of them was saved pretty much the second day. The other one, Lieutenant Burry, was in the water in and out of his dinghy for 6 days. The rough water knocked him out of the dinghy every half hour or so, he said. And by the time he got picked up 6 days later, he was having hallucinations. And he had very little to eat. We had just a mere stuff. But we also carried shotgun pellets for our 44 caliber pistols. And the shotgun pellet was birdshot. And the thought was, if you are lucky enough to be able to shoot a seagull, maybe you can eat the seagull. And because you didn't have much range with the birdshot, you probably couldn't hit anything much beyond 20 feet. So anyway, Burry gets saved and he comes to his senses later. And about 2 months later, he was being interviewed by somebody in headquarters. And they asked him, well, how'd you make out? Did you get a chance to shoot at any seagulls? He says, no, by that time I was consigned to die. How the hell was I going to, even if I shot that bird, how was I going to defeather it and eat that raw meat? I would rather die. It sounds good in survival training, but not in real life. I thought that was so funny. You want to take it out? Okay.
And the final report.